She whispered one thing that could ruin everything, and I couldn't stop listening. I never thought a single night could feel like a lifetime. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, tapping against the windows of her small, warmly lit kitchen. I sat on the edge of the counter, my knees drawn up, staring at the faint steam rising from my untouched mug of coffee. She moved quietly around the room, the soft swish of her sweater brushing against her elbows, and I realized I was holding my breath without even noticing. She wasn't my aunt, not really, not in any way that mattered to anyone else. But in this house, in this moment, she was the only person who made the world seem both terrifying and safe at once. I was 20, and she was, well, she carried herself like someone who had survived storms I couldn't even imagine. Mid-40s, maybe, but that age didn't capture the gravity in her eyes or the curve of her smile when she caught me looking. "Careful," she said softly, placing a plate of cookies on the counter. "Don't let them fall." Her voice had that low, warm edge tonight, like a secret hiding under ordinary words. I smiled nervously, pretending to focus on the plate instead of the way her hair fell across her shoulder or the subtle tension in her hands as she adjusted the napkin beneath the cookies. "You're different tonight," I said, not knowing why the words came out so clumsy. My fingers traced the rim of the mug, trying to distract myself. She stopped moving and turned toward me, her eyes catching the dim light, and for a moment I thought I saw something fragile in them, like a flicker of doubt she wasn't used to showing. "Different how?" she asked, but it wasn't really a question. Her tone held an unspoken understanding, as if she already knew I'd been thinking too much, wanting too much. I cleared my throat, heart hammering like it would betray me if I stayed still. I mean, you look relaxed, comfortable, not the way you usually do when I visit." My voice cracked a little, and I cursed myself internally. Her lips twitched, almost a smirk, almost something else. She moved closer, closer than normal, so I could smell the faint scent of her perfume mixed with rain and something that made my stomach twist. "Maybe," she said quietly, "because tonight isn't normal." The silence stretched. I wanted to reach out to close the space between us, but my hands were suddenly too heavy, too clumsy. Instead, I just watched her, memorizing the way her eyes softened when they met mine, the subtle tilt of her head that made me feel like she was studying me, weighing me. Then she leaned down, just enough that her lips brushed my ear as she whispered, "Promise you'll keep this between us." The warmth of her breath sent a shock straight through me. I could feel my pulse racing, my body betraying the careful calm I try to maintain. "Of course," I managed, though my voice was barely audible, and it sounded like a lie even to me. My chest tightened. She straightened, eyes locking with mine, and for a heartbeat, I thought the world outside this tiny kitchen didn't exist. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. She froze. And in that instant, every thought I'd tried to ignore, the reckless pull, the growing tension, the dangerous thrill of it, collapsed into one question that neither of us dared speak. "Who's here?" The rain had stopped, leaving the night heavy and quiet outside. But inside the kitchen, everything felt charged. I kept replaying her words over and over. "Promise you'll keep this between us." Simple, whispered, and yet loaded with more weight than I'd ever felt from anyone before. I glanced at her, trying not to stare, but failing. There was something in the way she moved, deliberate but casual, like she had learned to mask the tremor of wanting something she shouldn't. I remember the stories my mother had told me about her past, the divorce, the nights spent raising her kids alone, the loneliness she hid behind polite smiles. And yet, that vulnerability didn't make her weak, it made her dangerous. Attractive in a way I knew I shouldn't chase. I cleared my throat, trying to distract myself with small talk, but every sentence fell hollow. "You don't have to stay up too late. I can clean this up," I said, my hands fumbling over the counter. She shook her head, brushing crumbs from her sweater. "No, I like this," she said, almost to herself. Then she paused, eyes lingering on mine longer than necessary. That look, it carried history I couldn't possibly understand yet, and the weight of unsaid things. I thought about my own life, 20, barely starting college, living in a half-empty apartment, chasing dreams that felt too far away. I'd kissed girls before, sure, but nothing like this. Nothing that made me freeze in my own skin just by standing too close to someone. I wanted to ask her what this meant, why tonight felt different, but my voice wouldn't obey. Instead, I let my eyes travel over her face, memorizing the slight crease at the corner of her mouth, the way her fingers unconsciously twisted the edge of her sleeve. Vulnerable, tempting, a person who had lived more in 40-something years than I could even imagine. Yet here she was, standing in the same small kitchen as me, looking at me like I mattered. She leaned on the counter, close enough that her arm brushed mine. I didn't pull away. My chest thumped, and I could feel the tension in her side matching my own. It was a silent acknowledgement of what neither of us could say aloud. Age, expectations, boundaries. All of it made this feel reckless, thrilling, impossible. And yet somehow, right? "You always look so serious," she said softly, almost teasing, almost a challenge. My mouth opened, then closed again. I wanted to tell her she made me reckless, that I thought about her when I shouldn't, that my mind refused to obey my sense of reason. Instead, I said nothing. We just stood there, the warmth between us growing heavier, unspoken yet undeniable. Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for the coffee mug, and the contact sent a shock straight through me. Our eyes met, a silent confession passing in a glance. Neither of us admitted it, but in that moment, the world outside, the rules, the risks didn't matter. And then she smiled. Just a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it carried everything. Shared history, curiosity, temptation. And I knew, without a word, that this night was only the beginning. The knock at the door was sharp, startling both of us. My heart jumped in my throat. I wasn't ready. None of this was ready. She froze, her hand hovering in midair as if she could vanish before anyone saw her standing too close to me. I'll get it," she whispered, but her voice trembled slightly. I could feel in my chest that pull between wanting to step forward and knowing I shouldn't. When she opened the door, it was her neighbor, a cheerful woman who liked to check in late at night with recipes or complaints about the dripping rain gutters. "Hey, sorry to bother," she began, peering past the threshold. Her gaze flicked to me for a fraction of a second, and I ducked behind the counter like a coward. Just for a second," my aunt said, her voice steady now, but her jaw tight. She smiled politely, letting the neighbor chat for a few moments before she closed the door and leaned against it with a heavy sigh. I watched her, every line in her face lit up by frustration and relief, and my pulse quickened. The proximity, the shared secret, the thrill of someone almost walking in on us. It made the air between us heavier. "I should go," I said, suddenly aware of the rules I was bending. I stood up, brushing crumbs from my jeans, pretending to focus on something mundane. "Should you?" she asked softly, tilting her head, eyes searching mine. That question wasn't about leaving the kitchen. It was about everything we weren't allowed to say aloud. I swallowed hard. I shouldn't. The words stumbled out, awkward, fumbling. My hands itched to reach for hers again, even though I knew it was reckless. She stepped closer, the scent of rain and something uniquely hers filling my senses. "I know," she said quietly, almost like a confession herself. Her fingers brushed mine as she rearranged the coffee mugs, deliberately slow, deliberately close. My stomach twisted. We stood like that for a moment, caught between the rules we couldn't break and the magnetic pull that refused to be denied. Then I almost spoke, almost said the words I'd been dying to say since the night began. Our faces drew closer. Too close. A sudden noise from the hallway, the scrape of a chair, or maybe just my imagination, made me jerk back, and she flinched too. "We can't," she whispered, though her voice betrayed everything she wanted. Her eyes, dark and urgent, held mine in a silent struggle. "Why does it feel like we should?" I murmured, but it was more a question to the universe than to her. She shook her head, biting her lip, and for a second I saw the weight of decades, the life she'd lived, the boundaries she'd set, the caution that had kept her safe. And yet, despite all that, she didn't pull entirely away. She didn't step back far enough to erase the tension. She let it linger, unspoken, electric. And then her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, her expression tightening, and I caught the edge of fear, a trace of guilt, something dangerous. Someone was coming. Someone could ruin this. But even with the threat, even with the tension, I realized I didn't want to leave. I didn't want her to move away. The moment stretched, silent, charged, like a storm about to break, and I knew, no matter the risk, we were pulled together. Her phone vibrated again, this time louder, cutting through the quiet like a knife. She glanced at it, and I caught the flash of something, alarm, maybe guilt, maybe fear. Whoever was on the other line didn't know what they were about to step into, but I did. And I needed, to be the one standing here with her, despite all the reasons I shouldn't. "You're tense," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper, trying to anchor myself in the moment. She shook her head, fingers twisting the strap of her sweater. She stopped. The words dissolved into the air between us, leaving raw, naked tension. Her gaze met mine, and suddenly I could see it all. The desire she tried to hide, the exhaustion of holding herself back, the fear of stepping over a line she shouldn't. I stepped closer, heart hammering. "You don't have to pretend," I said, voice low. "I see it." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then she looked away, biting her lip. "You shouldn't," she whispered, and I knew she meant it. But the way she lingered, the way her breath caught when our arms brushed, it was a confession louder than any words. A memory flashed in my mind. Me, 15 years younger, sitting on the porch steps of this very house, watching her laugh with someone else. I'd always thought she was untouchable then. Now, standing here 20 years older and impossibly close, I realized I'd never been closer. And the weight of that gap, the risk, the social lines, the whispers if anyone found out, made everything more intense. I wanted to reach for her, wanted to close the distance, wanted to feel the warmth of her skin against mine. But I froze, caught between fear and desire. My voice broke. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes found mine again, soft, conflicted, dangerous. She swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the mug at her hands. "You shouldn't," she said again, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I took a careful step closer, drawn to her like gravity, and for a heartbeat, I thought we'd fall into it, fall into each other, and never come up. I wanted that. I wanted her. I wanted to erase every boundary, every rule, every reason why this was impossible. But then she flinched at a sound from the hallway, a floorboard creak, maybe my imagination, maybe someone else, and suddenly I was acutely aware of how fragile our secret was, how easily it could be shattered, how quickly it could all slip away if we weren't careful. Her hand hovered near mine, frozen in indecision. The space between us crackled. Her eyes were wide, searching mine for permission, for reassurance, for surrender, and I could feel every unspoken word pressing down, thick as the rainstorm outside. We were teetering on the edge, every second stretching impossibly long. One move, one word, one glance, and everything would change. The question hung in the air, unspoken, unbearable. Do we risk it? Or do we step back and lose this moment forever? And then, the sound of the front door opening echoed faintly from the hall. The front door had closed again, leaving us in the kitchen with the remnants of our unspoken tension. I let out a shaky breath, thinking the moment had passed. But then, her phone buzzed again, this time a message flashing across the screen in bold letters. She glanced at it, and I saw her face change. The warmth drained, replaced by a tight, controlled expression I'd never seen before. It's for my daughter," she muttered, almost like she was trying to convince herself. My heart sank. Her daughter. My aunt's daughter. The very thought of anyone else in the mix added layers I wasn't ready to handle. What does it say?" I asked, trying to mask the panic creeping into my voice. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. She's coming home earlier than expected," she said finally, words clipped, distant. The casual tone didn't fool me. I could feel the weight of dread pressing against her chest. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught. My stomach twisted with the sudden, sharp realization that everything we'd tiptoed around, the closeness, the attraction, the forbidden tension, could be exposed in minutes. Every brush of her fingers, every lingering glance could be seen as betrayal. And yet, despite the threat, I couldn't step away. "Then we have to," I began, but she raised a hand. "No," she interrupted softly, almost desperately. "Not like this. We can't." Her words should have broken me. They almost did. But the look in her eyes, the tremble in her fingers as she gripped the mug, told me she didn't want to stop either. She was trapped by her own rules, by the expectations she had built around herself for decades, and by the fear of hurting someone she loved. And yet here she was, standing closer than she had any right to, pulled toward me as much as I was toward her. I stepped slightly forward, careful, deliberate. "Then let's make it count," I whispered, my voice low enough that it was almost drowned by the soft hum of the refrigerator. She blinked at me, startled, uncertainty and longing clashing in her expression. Before she could answer, her daughter's voice floated down the hallway. "Mom? Are you here?" Panic. Alarm. The moment evaporated, leaving nothing but tension so thick I could almost taste it. I caught her hand as she moved to hide the mug, a brief, desperate touch that sent shivers through both of us. Our fingers lingered, trembling, as if we were both testing the limit of what we could risk. She met my eyes, panic and desire warring in her gaze. We have to wait," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But her fingers didn't pull away. The contact, brief and forbidden, became a promise neither of us could keep out loud. And in that instant, I realized that nothing was safe anymore. Not the house, not our secret, not even the feelings we tried to suppress. Everything had changed. The question hovered between us, heavier than ever. How much are we willing to risk? The hallway was quiet again, but every second stretched like a wire about to snap. Her daughter's voice had faded, but the tension it left behind clung to us. I could feel it in my chest, heavy and insistent. We couldn't pretend anymore. Not to ourselves, not in this fragile space. She turned toward me, eyes wide, trembling, caught between caution and desire. I saw everything there. The decades of restraint, the fear of scandal, the weight of responsibility, and beneath it, the raw, aching longing she couldn't deny. "I can't. I shouldn't," she whispered, and yet she didn't move away. Her hands hovered near mine, indecisive, almost pleading. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Then don't," I said, my voice barely audible. "Not yet. But stay. Just stay." She blinked, and in that moment I saw her surrender, not to me, but to the honesty of the moment. The walls between us cracked. I reached for her hand slowly, and this time she didn't pull back. Our fingers intertwined, hesitant at first, then tighter, as if we both needed the contact to prove that reality wasn't just a cruel dream. "You're reckless," she murmured, a small smile tugging at her lips. There was a tremor there, fear and delight mixed in equal measure. I laughed softly, almost nervously. "Maybe," I admitted, "but only with you." The confession hung between us, fragile and dangerous, yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, we were allowed to be fully ourselves, flawed, human, vulnerable. I could see the years she had lived, every compromise, every lonely night, and yet here she was daring herself to risk it all. I leaned closer, our foreheads almost touching. "If this is wrong," I whispered, "I don't care. I need to know you feel it too." Her eyes softened, and I could see the truth there, truth she couldn't speak aloud, but which hung in the air anyway. "I feel it," she admitted, barely a whisper, and it was enough. Enough to shatter all the rules, enough to let the fear recede, enough to make the risk worthwhile. The tension didn't vanish completely. The danger, the consequences, the voices outside, everything that made this impossible still existed. But for this moment, in this fragile bubble of warmth and shared breath, none of it mattered. We stayed like that for a heartbeat, suspended between decision and action, reality and desire. I traced the line of her jaw with my thumb, careful, reverent. She leaned into it slightly, a silent promise, a surrender without words. And then the hallway light flickered. The world outside intruded again. We separated just enough to breathe, yet close enough that nothing could erase the connection. I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. But I also knew that whatever came next, we had crossed a line together, and neither of us would ever forget it. Her hand lingered in mine as she whispered, almost to herself, maybe this is worth it." And in that soft, fragile sentence, I felt it too. The impossible, undeniable, reckless pull of something neither of us could ignore. Morning light filtered softly through the kitchen blinds, painting golden stripes across the counter where we had spent the night tangled in unspoken words and quiet confessions. The storm had passed outside, leaving a clean, sharp smell of rain and earth that mingled with the lingering warmth between us. We sat across from each other, coffee mugs in hand, though neither of us drank. My fingers traced the rim of my cup absently, stealing glances at her the way I had all night. She noticed, of course, and didn't look away. Instead, she smiled faintly, a smile that carried relief, wonder, and the kind of quiet joy that doesn't need words. "I can't believe we made it through the night without." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. Words felt clumsy, incapable of capturing the weight of what had passed between us. She chuckled softly, the sound warm and reassuring. "Without what?" she asked, though I knew she meant the same thing I did. "Without giving in entirely, without letting the world see what we felt, without stepping off the edge and regretting it." We lingered in silence, and it felt like permission to just be here, together, without pretending or fearing. The age gap, the past mistakes, the rules society had written for us, all of it felt distant, irrelevant for these moments. "I never thought," I began, hesitant, "that someone like you could care about me." My words came out awkward and unsure, but she reached across the counter, her hand covering mine. That small gesture carried more reassurance than any speech could. "I didn't either," she admitted softly, eyes glimmering with both mischief and something deeper. "But sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes the things you're not supposed to want are exactly the things you need." We laughed lightly, the tension of the night dissolving slowly, though the memory of it stayed vivid. Sharp, intoxicating, unshakable. It was messy, real, and human. Just like us. I wanted to stay frozen in this perfect moment, but reality had its own rhythm. Still, even as the day began, we knew this wasn't the end of our story. Not really. Every look, every shared breath, every small touch would remind us of what we'd found in each other. A connection that defied expectations, age, and fear. Her fingers tightened slightly around mine, a silent promise. I squeezed back, and it felt like a beginning rather than a conclusion. The storm had passed, but we had weathered a different kind of storm inside ourselves. And though the future remained uncertain, we had discovered something undeniable, the courage to follow our hearts, even when the path was messy, forbidden, or unknown. I watched her take a sip of coffee, sunlight catching the glint in her eyes, and I knew, whatever happened next, this night had changed us forever. And I wondered, quietly, almost to myself, did we dare enough? Did we take the leap fully? Comment below with your thoughts and your favorite part. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally charged stories like this. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new video.